Think about the last time you stood at a grocery checkout counter, looked at the total on the screen, and felt that sudden, sharp pinch in your chest. Or the feeling when you open a utility bill, or watch the numbers spin at the gas pump, wondering if there is a glitch in the machine. It is a quiet, ambient anxiety that has settled over millions of households. As we head toward the midterm elections, this is not just a collection of personal frustrations. It is the defining battleground of the political landscape. Today, we are looking at the affordability crisis, not just as a series of unfortunate economic events, but as a complex, highly strategic landscape. We want to dissect the rising costs of housing, healthcare, groceries, utilities, and fuel through the cold analytical lens of an intelligence briefing.
It really does require that kind of systematic approach, because when people are struggling to pay for basic necessities, the emotional noise is incredibly high. But if you strip away the rhetoric, you see a grid of competing interests, structural bottlenecks, and strategic calculations. To understand why we are here, and why solutions seem so elusive, we can apply the tools of corporate and military strategy. Specifically, we can look at this through a pestle analysis to map the macro-environmental forces, a SWOT analysis to see the vulnerabilities of the system, and a MOST analysis to understand the mission and tactics of the key players.
Let us start with that macro view, the pestle framework. When we look at the political and economic forces driving this crisis, what stands out as the primary catalyst?
Economically, we are dealing with the hangover of unprecedented global supply chain disruptions, coupled with massive fiscal injections that stimulated demand when supply was choked. But politically, the timing is critical. We have the looming expiration of the Affordable Care Act subsidies. During the pandemic, enhanced subsidies made healthcare significantly cheaper for millions. Now, those subsidies are set to expire, threatening to spike premiums right as voters head to the polls. This creates a massive political vulnerability. On the social front, the pressure is compounding. Housing costs have outpaced wage growth for years, creating a class of voters who feel locked out of the American dream. When you layer on the environmental and legal factors, like shifting energy regulations and global fuel volatility, you get a perfect storm where every basic human need is inflating simultaneously.
It is like a multi-front war, where the consumer is fighting defensive battles on 5 different lines: shelter, health, food, warmth, and mobility. If we transition this into a SWOT analysis, looking at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for the policymakers trying to navigate this, how do the cards stack up?
The strength of the current administration lies in its ability to deploy short-term, targeted relief, like drawing down the Strategic Petroleum Reserve or proposing temporary tax holidays. These are highly visible actions. However, the weakness is that these tools are superficial. They do not fix the structural deficit in housing supply, nor do they lower the actual cost of medical care or agricultural production. The opportunity here is for a fundamental pivot toward long-term resilience, such as streamlining supply chains or investing in domestic production capacity. But the threat is the ticking clock of the election. Long-term solutions take years to bear fruit, but voters want prices to drop by next Tuesday. If policymakers try to implement deep, structural reforms now, the short-term disruption could alienate voters even further, leading to a total loss of political capital.
Which brings us to the core tension of the entire crisis. The timeline of political survival does not align with the timeline of economic recovery. Before we dive deeper into the strategic mind games and the game theory behind why our leaders behave the way they do, let's take a quick moment to talk about what we do here.
If you are enjoying this deep dive into the mechanics of global and domestic issues, you should check out our home network. The New Sentinel is a podcast dedicated to providing in-depth discussions and deep dives into a wide array of topics. From the glitz and glamour of pop culture to the strategic intricacies of military operations, we cover it all.
Each episode is thoughtfully crafted to offer listeners a comprehensive understanding of the subject matter, featuring expert interviews, detailed analysis, and engaging storytelling. Whether you are a pop culture enthusiast or someone with a keen interest in global security, the New Sentinel has something for everyone. Tune in, view, subscribe, comment, and post an inquiry to stay informed and entertained.
Now, back to our strategic briefing on the affordability crisis. Let us look at the actors involved through the MOST framework, which stands for mission, objectives, strategy, and tactics. If we analyze the governing party and the opposition, their missions are diametrically opposed, yet their tactics are dictated by the exact same set of rules.
Right. The mission for the incumbents is retention of power, while the mission for the challengers is acquisition of power. For the incumbents, the objective is to minimize the blame they receive for inflation. Their strategy is to redirect the narrative, pointing to corporate greed, external geopolitical conflicts, or supply chain bottlenecks as the culprits. Their tactics include high-profile antitrust investigations, releasing oil reserves, and proposing windfall taxes.
Exactly. On the flip side, the challengers have the objective of maximizing the blame placed on the current administration. Their strategy is to link every single price increase directly to government spending and domestic energy policies. Their tactics are simple but highly effective. Highlight the cost of a gallon of gas or a carton of eggs at every campaign stop, framing the crisis as a direct result of leadership failure. But this is where game theory comes in, and it explains why we see so much posturing and so little actual problem solving.
Walk us through that. If we treat the affordability crisis as a game played by two political parties, what does the payoff matrix look like?
Think of it as a variation of the prisoner's dilemma. The optimal outcome for the country would be cooperative problem solving, passing bipartisan housing reforms, stabilizing energy policies, and finding a sustainable way to fund healthcare. But cooperation carries a massive political risk. If Party A cooperates to solve the problem, they share the credit with Party B. Worse, if Party A compromises on a core ideology to reach a deal, Party B can defect, walk away from the table, and blast Party A for selling out, gaining a massive advantage in the midterms.
So, the dominant strategy for both sides is to defect. It is safer to weaponize the crisis than to risk compromising to fix it.
Precisely. If you defect while the other side tries to cooperate, you win the narrative battle. If both sides defect, we get gridlock, which is the Nash equilibrium we currently live in. The system is locked in a state where prices remain high, accusations fly back and forth, and the voter is left holding the bill. Take the ACA subsidies as a prime example. Extending them permanently requires legislative compromise, but letting them expire allows the opposition to blame the current administration for rising premiums, while the incumbents can blame the opposition for blocking the extension. The pain of the consumer becomes the political capital of the campaigner.
It is a cynical realization, but it explains the absolute lack of movement on issues that seem to have obvious, common sense solutions. We see the same dynamic in housing. Everyone agrees we need more supply. But local zoning laws are controlled by municipal governments, where the game theory dictates that local politicians protect current homeowners who do not want new construction near them, even if it hurts the broader region. The incentives are misaligned at every level of the game.
And the cost of this gridlock is not distributed evenly. It falls hardest on those who spend the highest percentage of their income on inelastic goods. You can choose not to buy a new car or skip a vacation, but you cannot choose to stop eating, freeze in the winter, or go without life-saving medication. When these inelastic goods inflate, it acts as a regressive tax, eroding the middle class and pushing lower-income families into poverty.
So where does this leave us as we look toward the future? If the game theory dictates gridlock, is there any force that can break this equilibrium?
Historically, the only thing that breaks a political Nash equilibrium of this kind is a crisis so severe that the cost of inaction becomes higher than the cost of compromise. Alternatively, a decisive shift in voter behavior could force a change. If voters begin to actively punish posturing and reward pragmatic, cross-aisle solutions, the payoff matrix changes. But that requires a highly informed electorate that can look past short-term rhetorical points and demand structural accountability.
Which is a tall order in an era of hyper-polarization. It seems we are heading into a period where economic survival will require individuals to adopt their own micro-strategies, finding ways to adapt to high costs because systemic relief is not coming anytime soon. As we wrap up today's discussion, it is clear that the affordability crisis is not just a passing economic phase, but a structural test of our political and social systems. The question we are left with is simple yet profound. Can a political system designed around short-term electoral cycles ever successfully address long-term structural decay, or are we destined to remain trapped in this cycle of crisis and blame? Thank you for listening to this strategic breakdown, and we will see you next time on The Briefing.